Nick, are you able to hear me?
Yes, I can hear everyone, but I'm having everyone on mute because I'm setting up the stream right now.
I'm going to try to run the show myself. I've got two screens open, but if it doesn't work, when we come to that point in the agenda, if you could act as backup, that would be super fantastic. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to mute everyone.
We should start, right?
Let's hold off for just a moment. Literally I don't know, over the last week, most social media platforms changed the way they do live streaming, and it's having trouble connecting to the websites for some reason. I'm trying to figure it out.
Okay.
Okay, we're good.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for joining this morning. I want to first apologize for the delay. We had some technical difficulties. Yeah, I want to welcome everybody. We're here, of course, in preparation for the committee meeting today, the Renters' Rights Committee meeting, to discuss the need to cancel rent, mortgages, and utility payments. I think just looking out, in the out of the window here with the rain and the wind coming down, on the one hand, it kind of makes me thankful this is an online community meeting. But on the other hand, it really kind of cuts to the heart about how important what we're fighting for is. We know that in the months to come, we are going to see a wave of mass evictions as the impacts of COVID-19 continue to take its toll on the economy and on working people. And if we don't fight back, if we don't, as renters and working people, get organized to fight to cancel rents, mortgages, and utility payments, then the impacts are going to be extreme. So want to welcome everybody. It's a little bit different, the setup this morning. We are going to begin as usual with Nick Jones showing everybody how to sign up for public comment. We're going to go then to Kshama, Councilmember Sawant, for some important political contextualization. And then, unlike usual, we're not going to transfer directly to the committee. The committee this morning is actually at 11 a.m. So we're going to have people come back at 11 a.m. when, of course, we're going to hear from an exciting panel of community activists about how we're going to organize and fight, use the council position that our movement has through Kshama Sawant and Socialist Alternative to fight for renters, against evictions, and to cancel rent, mortgages, and utility payments. So without further ado, let's go ahead right now and hear from Nick Jones about how we sign up for public comment. It should be open right now so we can give comment later on today at 11. So go ahead, Nick, if you can take it from here.
Thank you, Adam. One moment here. Okay. Get it out of here. All right. So folks maybe know, hopefully you've done this before, but to give public comment during the council meeting, you'll need to find this webpage. And I most easily find it usually by just looking up Seattle public comment in whatever search bar you happen to be using. And then just click usually on the top link. It should say public comment with the .gov address here, the seattle.gov URL. You want to just scroll down. This is all instructions about how to give public comment. You'll find this form. It's a public comment sign up form. And you'll just want to fill this out in its entirety. Very importantly, you'll want to use an accurate email address and phone number. The way that they do get people on the streams to speak for city council meetings is they'll, once you fill out this form, a link will be sent to whatever email address you put in here to get on the Zoom call, and then they'll identify you based on this phone number. So definitely make sure both these are accurate, and then just click this for this agenda item you're addressing. You can really put in whatever you want, cancel rents and mortgages, whatever you really want to say. Then just hit submit, and it should send an email right to you. Folks should definitely do that right now. It should have just opened a short while ago. There's plenty of time still to sign up before the 11 a.m. meeting. So hopefully folks, while they're watching the stream, can hop over and do that right away. Thanks.
All right. Yeah, thank you, Nick. And yeah, just want to reiterate that even in committee meetings like this, which is introducing this discussion about how we can use this council office to fight to cancel rent, mortgages, and utilities, it's really important to always contextualize it within the needs, of ordinary people, the movement, the activists that make up this fight. So hearing about the impact that COVID-19 is having on you, your neighbors, and the need for this demand is really, really critical and important. Let's go ahead. We're gonna, in a minute, hear from Councilmember Sawant about this fight and also the political context in which it's occurring. We've seen in the last few days just how desperately the establishment wants to prevent movements of ordinary people from winning and achieving change. Even the George Floyd uprising that occurred over the past several months, and the council's decision to pass very minimal funding of the Seattle Police Department, even that was unacceptable to Mayor Durkin, to the city's establishment, who tried, of course, through a mayoral veto to eliminate even those small cuts. But then, of course, we saw just an outpouring, the movement strike back and say that this was needed, and the council had to relent. It's in this context, of course, that ordinary renters need to organize and link these movements together so that we can fight and really recognize that if ordinary people aren't going to be paying the cost of this crisis, we're going to put it on big banks, corporate landlords, corporate management companies, that we have to have an alternative so that working people don't pay this cost, and that is to cancel rent, mortgages, and utilities. So let's go ahead and hear right now from Councilmember Sawant about more of this political context and how we can fight for this. Kshama, take it from here, please.
Thank you, Adam and Nick, and welcome everybody. Good morning. Thank you for joining us. Yes, we are preferring that this meeting is online right now because in the middle of the pandemic, we have the rain coming down on us, but it is nonetheless extremely important that we continue getting organized. And I think that's really the bottom line message. And it sounds like we say this all the time, but it is so crucial to understand what role we can play through using our council office position, which 100% belongs to working people and the marginalized and the oppressed, but at the same time having a fighting movement on the street. And I'm, as Adam was mentioning, there's just so many lessons that we need to draw on from the last few days. Obviously, the most recent occurrence, of course, in Seattle is the successful override of the mayor's shameful veto of the August vote by the city council for the budget of the rest of this year. And we have to say in the back, it happened, that veto happened in the context of the worst recession since the Great Depression, people facing already massive loss of income. On top of that, a budget that already, the budget that was voted in August, the context also was that that was not in any way a fair budget. It was not a moral document, which is why when the budget was first up for a vote in August, I voted against it, though I voted yes, our office voted yes on the override, because we simply and completely reject the mayor's attempt, the corporate Democratic Mayor Durkin's attempt to undermine whatever gains we did win in the August budget. And I think that's the starting point. The gains we did win in the August budget were a result of movement building. It was a result of the Justice for George Floyd movement and the People's Budget movement really pushing for as much as we could. And in that budget, we won finally. And of course, it is absolutely a question of enforcement and making it happen in real life. But it was really remarkable that the pressure from the movement was such that finally, after years of our People's Budget movement demanding, we were able to win the Stop the Sweeps legislation as part of this budget vote in August. We were able to win a few $1 million. This is not a defunding of the police, but we were able to win a few $1 million of reduction in the bloated police budget and transfer that for community programs. And we were able to win some minor but important progress on the Green New Deal funding. And in fact, we're going to be discussing the Green New Deal funding today in the committee at 11 before we talk about the cancel rent movement. But despite the fact that the August budget was so inadequate and contains a few very important points that were going to be crucial for the lives of ordinary people, not to mention of the Black and brown communities, corporate Mayor Durkin thought her job is to serve the interests of big business and the capitalist state. And so she vetoed it. And the way we won the override was not, and this is a very important lesson we need to draw, and this is not about personalities. This is not about individual politicians talking badly about other individual politicians. We have to understand that this is politics. And if we are going to win serious victories in the future, then it is important for us to understand how politics works under capitalism. And it is crucial, absolutely crucial for us to draw out the lesson that the override was not won because all the Democrats on the city council decided to do the right thing. Absolutely not. I firmly believe that even until hours before the council vote yesterday, they were getting ready to do the bait and switch that the Democratic Party always does, where some of the Democrats will do the right thing and the others will take the bad vote. They will share out however they work, but in reality, these are variously choreographed roles that Democratic politicians play in sort of in coordination with one another. So when they talk about, well, Socialist Alternativist Party, well, the Democratic Party is a party. The question is, there is leadership, there is a party. The question is, whose interest does the party serve? And what we have seen is that the Democratic Party on the city council was getting ready to completely capitulate to big business and Mayor Durkin by letting the veto be sustained. And the way we know this is because aside from a few council members, others were remaining silent about how they were going to vote on the override. And furthermore, and this is the most important piece of the political analysis that we have to draw out, which is that the same council members who were going to vote for the override, which is the right thing, of course, those same council members had already cooked up a deal, a so-called alternate budget with the mayor. Imagine going and negotiating with the same person who is against you. I mean, imagine if this makes sense as a bargaining strategy. But they had already cooked up this deal, and that was going to be a very gutted budget. It would have lost us all the gains that I just mentioned that we had won in the August vote. We would have lost all of that had we not won the override, because they already had an so-called alternate budget ready to go. And the reason they had that ready to go was because they were going to do this bait and switch where some Democrats will vote yes, some Democrats will vote no, and ultimately they were going to kill the override. The reason we did win is because there was an absolutely furious resistance from the bottom, from thousands of people pushing back, in combination with our Socialist Council office having the courage to expose what was actually going on rather than taking at face value what any given politician was saying. And that's important. Our working class movement has to have the political independence and courage, moral courage, to call out things as they actually are going on, not as they are presented to us. And we should refuse to see this as some sort of personal attack, that we are making some sort of personal attack against politicians. Absolutely not. What we are doing is standing up for working people by helping people see what is actually going on. And it was the combination of our office exposing what was going on and the ferocious resistance from the bottom that we were able to win that override. And that is a massive example of how we can actually win victories. But there's another lesson, a more sober lesson, and this is important for the cancel rent movement, which is that, and this is a question hundreds of activists were asking in person on social media. I've personally received messages from a lot of activists asking me this question, and I've been responding to them, which is that how after so many days of Justice for George Floyd protests, how after millions around the country and tens of thousands in Seattle went out on the street, sustained tear gas and rubber bullets and other attacks, and showed that we have a multiracial working class solidarity against racism, against police violence. We are very clear about this. The majority of Seattle is against these policies. How is it that in the middle of all that, the Democratic Council was getting ready to sustain the veto? This is what was puzzling for a lot of people. And I think the answer to that is twofold. One is to see that the Democratic establishment is not on our side. It's absolutely not on our side. And ultimately, the Democratic Party will extract its discipline from all council members who are Democrats. So it doesn't matter whether an individual Democrat is good or bad. That is what you're going to do. That is why it's so important that our office, through my presence, is completely independent of the Democratic Party and accountable to social movements. And the other part of the answer, and this is very crucial, is that as soon as the Justice for George Floyd movement, as soon as the high point of the protests was in an ebb, as happens to all movements because people can't go out marching endlessly, as soon as the movement had a little bit of an ebb, you saw the capitalist state coming into a reaction. And that means both the Trump administration playing an absolutely despicable role attempting to file sedition charges against protesters, declaring cities like Seattle as anarchist jurisdictions. But at the same time, you also have Democratic Party-led cities around the country like Seattle refusing to actually do what the movement is wanting them to do, which is defunding the police. And so as soon as there was a little bit of a lull in the movement, you saw the Democratic Party in Seattle coming back and attempting to undermine what they had already committed to do in August. So in a month and a half, in just a month and a half, they were getting ready to dismantle what they themselves had voted for on city council. That was about to happen, but we pushed back against it. So what's the conclusion? The conclusion is that there is no way we can win any major victories unless there is a fighting movement on the streets, in the workplaces. And as far as cancel rent is concerned, that movement has to be organized building by building, neighborhood by neighborhood, city by city. And literally that means all of us renters and also middle class and working class homeowners talking to our neighbors, drawing out what personal suffering people are going through and explaining to them that their personal suffering is not of their own making. Capitalism itself is in a decline. The capitalist economy is in a recession. We are facing a major recession. On top of that, we have a pandemic. Tens of millions have lost their jobs. In Seattle, it has meant more than 100,000 people being affected badly by either straight up laying off or by major loss of income. People have lost their loved ones in the COVID pandemic because we don't have the public health that we need. We don't have Medicare for all. So in this context, it is crucial that renters get organized. And that literally means having meetings like today and talking to your fellow renters. And that is the crux of what we're going to be discussing today. I'll stop there. We have lots more information and we will have more in the committee as well. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Kshama, for that really, exciting and inspirational, but at the same time, sober assessment of our movement, of our strength, and of course, the renters' rights movement. We're going to hear later in the committee from activists, ordinary people, renters who know full well that we do need inspiration. We need an exciting demand to organize around, and at the same time, we need to recognize that it is going to be a battle. And we're going to have a serious approach, especially towards political forces like the city council, like Governor Inslee. Part of having that serious approach, obviously, is arming our movement with the facts. We got them, and there's a lot of them. We're going to try and stick as close to to this 9:30 stop point as possible. But we don't actually, as normal, have a committee meeting right after. Again, people should remember that 11 a.m. is when we're going to have the committee meeting is going to start. But let's have a few of these kind of a preview. Jonathan Rosenblum, community organizer in our office, has a PowerPoint, which we're going to go through in full at the committee, that he can share a few of those slides with us right now. Jonathan, could you do that for us, please? Jonathan, you might be mute if you're talking right now.
Good morning, everybody. Are you able to see the slide?
Yes, we can.
Yes.
Great. So I will just very quickly go through a number of the slides that we're going to be showing today at the committee meeting. First of all, the framework for the discussion is the pandemic, the recession, and the movement to cancel rents, mortgages, utility fees, and late payments. We know, just as this leading activist from Kansas City has said, that every eviction is an act of violence. And every time that we're allowing an eviction to occur, we're putting a landlord's profits above people's lives. And we're going to show a number of statistics that I'm not going to review here at the committee meeting, because I think you're all familiar with what these statistics are about, that working people are struggling every day, and even more so during the pandemic. But what we will say is that we have, first of all, capitalism's economic crisis layered on top of that, the COVID crisis, and on top of that, these deferrals of expenses that we're winning, which is a good thing, through struggle. We're winning these moratoriums, but all that does is defer but not forgive future expenses. And that adds up to a tsunami of evictions, foreclosures, and bankruptcies once these emergency declarations expire. Nationally, it's estimated that 30 to 40 million people in America are at risk of eviction in the next several months. In Washington state, that's about 750,000 people who are at risk of eviction, about 1 in every 3 renter households in this state, if we don't cancel rents and mortgages. It's not just leading activists who are talking about this, but when we ran this petition in the spring to cancel rent, thousands of ordinary people signed on and told their stories. And here are a couple. Catherine talks about how a freeze in evictions means nothing if people are faced with back rents. Kurt from Tacoma pointed out the same thing. And again, we'll go through this in more detail at the committee meeting. The state and national movement to cancel all rent, mortgages, utilities, late fees, and housing debt. We'll hear from some activists and leaders in the statewide campaign this morning. But it needs to cover all residential renters who have suffered economically because of COVID. And it also needs to suspend and eliminate payments that homeowners would have to pay as a result if they've also been harmed as a result of COVID. We know through our struggles in the past that when tenants organize and fight back with our office, with allies, we can win, and we have won. And that's our job moving forward from today. I'm going to stop here since we are short on time this morning. This presentation will be given in more detail at the 11 o'clock meeting, and I look forward to seeing everybody there.
All right. So thank you, Jonathan, for that kind of brief intro to this presentation, which will be elaborated on at the 11 a.m. committee meeting. Thank you also, of course, Kshama, for that political context. And also, of course, thank you to, there's over 80 people watching this morning. And yeah, just going through these kind of basic, political updates and then preparing our movement to intervene in this committee meeting at 11 a.m. But then also, of course, it's just the beginning of an increasingly urgent fight back. As we've been working on this issue over the months, we know that in reality, the worst impacts on renters of the COVID-19 crisis are already being felt as, right in the middle of this pandemic, we see a slow trickle of economic evictions already occurring. Some landlords, of course, actually outright evicting in spite of the moratoria. And then we even see landlords like Cornell and Associates at the height of the George Floyd protests telling their tenants they need to remove Black Lives Matter signage from their windows. This is the kind of opposition that we're up against. It is a system, as Kshama and others and Jonathan point out, that is in complete decline, where the basic needs, whether it's Black people having the right to just live walking down the streets in their communities, or renters in the midst of a pandemic, the right to stay in their homes. And it's going to be our organizing and our fight that overcomes these just really aggressive symptoms of capitalism in decline. So I want to appreciate and thank everybody for joining us. Remember to sign up for public comment. We want to hear your stories to contextualize this discussion. And then, of course, stay in tune for the continued fight in the people's budget to defund the SBD by at least 50%, to fight mass evictions through renter organizing, and of course this fight to cancel rent, mortgages, and utility for working class renters, struggling homeowners, small businesses, and yes, even small landlords, to make big banks, corporate landlords, corporate management companies pay the costs of this economic crisis and the COVID-19 pandemic and not working people. So thank you so much. We'll see you again at 11 a.m. In an hour and a half. Take care. In solidarity.